So why didn't they steal this election? Since they have more power now.
Because I think it was too big to rig.
Well, President Donald Trump went on Meet the Depressed, and he absolutely owned it. I mean, it was going to be one of those interviews where they were going to try to get you and got you, and he got them, and he absolutely dominated that interview. And to be honest, I think the mainstream media did like the fact, whether or not they like Donald Trump or like his answers, what they did like, unlike anything they got from Camilla thinks she's a hottie Harris, or could possibly get out of dementia Joe Biden, they asked direct questions, and they got, oh, believe me, they got direct answers.
Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth.
Hi, I'm Pastor Marty. Welcome to the Afternoon Drive. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. And once you are, smack the bell. Click the word all. That will give you notification of my rants, my ravings, my undeniably flawless reasonings. Please like and share this video. It's the only way that we can get the word out that we're here. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of the Afternoon Drive. So Donald Trump goes on Meet the Depressed, and they asked him a series of questions, and I'm not going to get into it, but I'll tell you, this is actually an interview worth watching, and you want to watch the full, unabridged, unedited version, and I promise you, Donald Trump absolutely owned that interview. But when, she keeps saying that America wants to move past the events of the 2020 election cycle, yet she kept going back to it. So she doesn't really want to get past it. She's not past it. She's asked Donald Trump if he would now finally officially concede the election. He basically said, no, why would I do that? I mean, and the look on her face was priceless. I mean, he absolutely stunned her, shocked her. And he went on to say, come on, we know we have some election integrity issues. This is why we need to get back to paper ballots. This is why we need to do same-day voting. And this is why we need voter ID. And he said, even Jimmy Carter, told us back in the day, you need voter ID. And that mail-in ballots, it's way, way, way too easy for there to be problems and even deception and corruption. And so he owned the question, but of course, she wanted to know, well, then why didn't they fix this election? And his answer was pretty simple and straight to the point. It was too big to rig. And that was what we were all saying. Make it too big to rig. But, like he said, in California, we're 4 weeks after the election, and they're still counting votes. Give me a break. It means they keep coming up with a number that then they say, okay, we got to have more votes here, and poof, they just magically appear. So Donald Trump is onto this. The American people are onto this, and I do believe that in Donald Trump's next term, you're going to see some laws that are going to come forward that are going to standardize election procedures, and you're going to hear a hue and cry from the Democrats about it's in democracy, each state's supposed to be able to do it themselves. Isn't that funny? Each state's supposed to be able to do it themselves when it comes to elections and make up whatever laws they want to. But something like a child being born or being aborted, that we can't let the states decide. That must come from the national level. Isn't it interesting how the Democrats love to pick and choose what's a states' rights issue and what isn't? That all said, she absolutely was floored when he made it abundantly clear that he is going to pardon a lot of the J6 protesters that are in prison. And she said, is that going to happen in your first 100 days? He said, no, it's going to happen on day one. Some of these people have been sitting in prison for 3 years now. And a lot of them did nothing. They weren't violent. Some of them weren't even in the Capitol building. Some of them weren't even in Washington. They simply corresponded and talked about and posted about. And they're in jail. And He's going to issue pardons on day one. Trump is surrounding himself with a good team. This is why the rhinos are howling and screaming. They're all losing their minds over the people that he is appointing, like Kash Patel to head the FBI. Is this about going after your opponents? No, this is about rooting out corruption. The FBI was used to perpetrate the Russia collusion hoax concocted by Hillary Rotham Clinton. And they lied to the FISA court, 15, 16, 17 times, obtaining phony warrants. They destroyed the lives of people like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn, destroyed them. There's been no accountability. And this hauling them before Congress, asking them a few questions, and Jim Jordan gets the soundbite or Rand Paul gets the soundbite, but nothing happens to these people. They tried to pull off a soft coup against a duly elected Donald Trump in 2016. It is time for there to be justice for them, for Fauci, and for a whole lot of other people in Washington, D.C., and that's what they're so upset about. That all said, just watching the media go into meltdown mode over who Donald Trump appoints is priceless, especially Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Let me ask you about RFK Jr. He has obviously talked about his skepticism of vaccines. He's expressed opposition to childhood vaccines. Do you want to see childhood vaccines eliminated?
If they're dangerous for the children. Look.
So possibly?
When you look at some of the problems, when you look at what's going on with disease and sickness in our country, something's wrong.
Are you talking about autism?
Well, if you take a look at autism, you go back 25 years, autism was almost non-existent. It was, 1 out of 100,000. And now it's close to 1 out of 100.
Well,
I mean, what's happening? And I think a lot of good things are going to come from him. And he's not going to upset any system. He's not going to upset this. He's not looking to, to reinvent the wheel totally. But when you look at the numbers, we really don't have a very healthy country.
Well, sir, going back 25 years, studies show that there is no link between vaccines and autism. And yet it sounds like you are open to the possibility of him looking
I'm
at
open to
getting
anything.
rid of them?
I think somebody has to find out. If you go back 25 years ago, you had very little autism. Now you have it. I mean,
well, they say because they're better at identifying it.
1 in 100,000, and now it's 1 in 100. That's a pretty bad number.
Childhood vaccines.
I mean, something is going on. I don't know if it's vaccines. Maybe it's chlorine in the water, right? People are looking at a lot of different things.
Well, childhood vaccines.
I want them to look at everything.
RFK Jr.'s anti-vax. No, actually, he's not. What he's anti is, hey, first of all, most of these vaccines that have been produced in the last 30 plus years have actually undergone zero testing. And yet we're putting them out there and we're mandating that children have them. And he said, let's take a time out here and let's make sure that we have properly tested them. That's number one. Number two, I love Trump's answer there. We have a problem with rising autism. And I can tell you, I was, born in the late 60s, was a kid in the 1970s. The autistic or special needs kids, we had them in our schools. They had a special ed classroom. I don't remember there being many of them. And throughout the day, they had classes that were for them, and then they were mainstreamed into other classes. And Donald Trump is right. Look at we talk about the obesity rate. We talk about the mental health issues that are going on in this nation. The fact that we are, for being the most civilized country on the planet, we're the most unhealthy country on the planet, and we have got autism that is just off the charts. And he said, let's look at everything. Pre-pandemic, that was how science worked. There was no such thing as settled science and believe the science and I am science. No. Science was always about questioning and researching and examining and testing. And all that stopped when there was a narrative that had to be defended, because after all, first of all, we have patents and money going on, and then we're trying to cover up, the fact that there were problems, that we were funding research that was not supposed to be done on things like gain of function. You get it. And Donald Trump is saying, hey, we need to look at everything. I could tell you that several years ago, I was the administrator of a private academy in upstate New York. And I'm coming out of a store one day, and an older gentleman stopped me and he said, aren't you the administrator at such and such academy? I said, yes, I am. And he said, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He said, have you noticed in the past few years that boys in particular seem to be more and more hyperactive, harder to control? I said, well, there's certainly a rise in the hyperactivity of boys. In our area, which was a dairy farming community, there was one dairy farm in particular that was buying up all the other dairy farms. And this thing, in the world of corporate milk, this thing was a monster. Had several thousand head of cows. They had employees that ran this farm, not a mom and pop farmer. It was a milk company owned farm, a corporate farm. People clocked in and clocked out. It was a regular job, but they worked that farm round the clock. It was a 24-hour operation. And this older gentleman looked at me. He was an old retired farmer, and he said, the good Lord designed cows to be milked twice a day, in the morning and the late afternoon. And once you start milking on a schedule with a cow, you have to stay on that schedule. So if you milk every day at 5 a.m., they're gonna need to be milked at 5 a.m. And if you milk at 4 in the afternoon, every day at 4 in the afternoon, they need to be milked again. And once you get them on the schedule, you got to stay there. But he said cows were designed to be milked twice a day. And he mentioned the big monster farm, and he said they're milking those cows 4 times a day, because he said they're beefing every one of them up on steroids to make them like super cows. He said they are cutting 2/3 of their lifespan off. And when they die, he said, I don't know if they're selling them for dog food or what they're doing with them, but they just bring in a few thousand more head, start juicing them up, and like an assembly line, milking them 4 times a day. And he said they are juiced up on steroids. He said, where do you think that steroids are going? The milk. Bump, ba-dum, bump. Then you wonder why kids are bouncing off the walls. That's one simple example. Again, I'm not a scientist. I haven't studied all of that. I don't know if that's true, but when he said it, boom, bada bing, it made sense. And like Donald Trump said, we have got to get back to some common sense, and we're going to let RFK take a look at some things and make some recommendations. And we need to do something if we're actually not simply just talking about preserving the American status quo that we call democracy, but if we're truly going to preserve America, preserve life, then don't we need to get healthier? So again, hit it out of the park. And then there was the back and forth you knew she was going to bring up, and of course deal with illegal immigration and deportation. Are you going to deport people?
Talk about mass deportation, one of your big agenda items. You've talked about prioritizing people who have criminal histories.
Correct.
But is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it. And it's a very tough thing to do. But you have to have, you have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally. The people that have been treated very unfairly are the people that have been online for 10 years to come into the country. And we're going to make it very easy for people to come in terms of they have to pass the test. They have to be able to tell you what the Statue of Liberty is. They have to tell you a little bit about our country. They have to love our country. They can't come out of prisons. We don't want people that are in for murder. So we had 11,000 and 13,000 different estimates, 13,099 murderers released into our country over the last 3 years. They're walking down the streets, they're walking next to you and your family, and they're very dangerous.
The 13,000 figure, I think, goes back about 40 years.
No, it doesn't. No, it's within the 3-year period. It's during the Biden term. No, that was a fiction that they put that out. This was done by the Border Patrol. It's 13,099, and it's during the Biden period of time. And these are murderers, many of whom murdered more than one person. You don't want those people in this country.
Yes, he's going to deport people. He's going to start with the criminal element. And here, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think Mayor Eric Adams in New York, I think he's going to defect from the Democratic Party and become a Republican. I'm making that prediction. I think Mayor Eric Adams in New York is going to be all on for this because he sees what this has happened after he opened his big mouth and declared New York a sanctuary city, and in they came by the tens of thousands. They have destroyed hotels. They are losing businesses because they go in, they shoplift, they mug people, they're killing people, and it's out of control. And Eric Adams looking around saying, you know what? I said what I said because it was the political thing to say at the time. But the reality and the practicality of this is Donald Trump is the guy that's right on this one. And I think New York is going to help and cooperate in a very big way with helping Donald Trump do deportation. And then, yes, even the families that are not criminals are going to have to go back. Are you going to separate the children? No, they're going to. What if they were born here? Well, you know what? When they're 18, when they're 21, they can apply to come back. Bump. Bump. And then, of course, she had to bring up, some of the straw man issues that Kamala tried to make an issue during the campaign, like abortion.
Let's talk about abortion, sir. You have taken responsibility for overturning Roe v. Wade. You've said that abortion is now a state issue. There are steps that you could take, though, as president to restrict abortion through executive action without Congress. More than half of abortions in this country are medication abortions. Will you restrict the availability of abortion pills when you're in office?
I'll probably stay with exactly what I've been saying for the last 2 years, and the answer is no.
You commit to that?
Well, I commit. I mean, do things change? I think they change. I hate to go on shows like Joe Biden. I'm not going to give my son a pardon. I will not, under any circumstances, give him a pardon. I watched this, and I always knew he was going to give him a pardon, and so I don't like putting myself in a position like that. So things do change.
That might be one of the most brilliant, perfect answers. Things do change. Things change. The framers of our Constitution understood that. And there is a reason they wanted there to be an arduous process in changing or amending the Constitution. Because man changes his mind like that. We change on whims. Whatever is socially accepted today is socially not accepted tomorrow. Then the cancel culture comes for you. Ricky Gervais had an interesting take on this. I know he's a comedian, and I'll try to, clean up his language here a little bit. But he said, who knew back in the day when you tweeted something like, women don't have penises, that 10 years later, that would be considered controversial, and the people that tweeted things like that could potentially lose their jobs by the cancel culture mafia. So our framers understood, and they were not all born-again, Bible-believing Christian men. No, they weren't. But they built the laws of this nation on the Word of God because the Word of God doesn't change. The moral absolutes of the Word of God never change. And they wanted that in the Constitution because they wanted there to be a hard and cumbersome, arduous process to changing, because man changes on a whim. And Donald Trump gave a very honest answer there in this particular case regarding would he or would he not declare the abortion pill nationwide taboo. And he said, right now, I don't see any reason to, but things do change. It was an honest answer. It was a direct answer. And again, Donald Trump owned that interview.